Dumelang Afsheni Ralocha Sanmanani Mulweni. My name is Naledi Mfoloe, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the latest edition of the African Diaspora News channel, where we unravel the stories that shape our world and our communities. To be honest, watching the recent interview between Wode Maya and Joost Strydom, the CEO of Orania, left me feeling deeply conflicted and emotionally charged, because as a Black South African, seeing a white person in South Africa confidently defend the segregationist policies of Orania with the same old tired excuses just honestly hit me in the gut. And I honestly can't just let this slide without speaking on it. Now, as Joost Strydom, who in his white Afrikaner privilege, claims that Orania is the only home he knows, right? And that he has nowhere else to go. And of course, I understand the attachment to one's land and one's home, but let's be clear here. The land is built on stolen Black land. The very fact that this is the only home he knows is the result of centuries of displacement and dispossession of the indigenous people of this country. So no, I really don't have sympathy for the only home I know line, because what about the homes and lands that were stolen from Black people so that people like him could enjoy their safe space? Let's watch.
The question, why can't a Black person come here, is not the right question. It's more a question like a marriage between two people. It's an exclusive affair. Doesn't mean you're against anyone else. You take your wife. She's important to you.
Yep.
Or and in your wedding, in your marriage, you're exclusive. Doesn't mean it's not built on hate. It's built on love for our culture. We want to preserve our culture. We want to preserve our traditions, our faith, our language. These are the things that we want to preserve.
But someone might ask, if you want to preserve your culture, you're preserving your culture on a land that belongs to South Africans.
The land here, we bought, we paid for it.
From who?
Well, at that stage, we bought it from the previous owner, which was the government, right?
But I don't think an African can leave Africa, go to Europe, and say that we just bought this land and no one is allowed to come in.
Our name is Afrikaners. Our language is Afrikaans. Right. So we feel part of this continent, and maybe people don't agree, but I don't have another home. Obviously I know that I have European roots.
Yeah.
400 years ago.
Yeah.
For 400 years, my people have been here.
Yeah.
I love Africa. I don't want to live anyplace else. I feel a part of this continent. My language grew, obviously from Dutch, but it grew on this continent.
Then, of course, the typical narrative of, how did he say it? Diversity is the preservation of white culture. Oh, really? So tell me, how is the preservation of white culture being achieved when it's on land that was violently taken from Black people? This whole concept of preserving white culture on land built from systemic exploitation of others is such a slap in the face for the Black people of South Africa. It makes me ask even, right? How can you speak of cultural preservation when it's rooted in exclusion and historical wrongs?
The people of South Africa.
I don't think so.
Do you believe that whatever you guys are practicing here is racism?
I do not believe that we are practicing racism. To tell you the truth, I've said it many times that if the question is, are there racists in Orania, I can assure you they are. There are racists in every town in South Africa, and every country in the world you'll find racists. That is a fact. The Orania model is a model of cultural preservation, and that is not racist. So you might disagree with me, but my personal belief, my honest belief, is that the Orania model is not racist at all. It is, however, a model to preserve something that we hold dear and to create a future where we can live our values, our religion, our language, and share our culture.
If you check when South Africa gained independence, if you check the coat of arms of South Africa, it said there is unity in diversity. Orania is within South Africa, but at the end of the day, I believe what you are practicing in here is not unity in diversity.
I beg to differ.
Can you explain that?
How can there be any diversity in South Africa if cultures are not allowed to be themselves? How can there be any diversity at all? If everyone is the same, there's no diversity. If you have a cultural community and you have the...
And let's talk about what happened at the end of that interview. Orania's true intentions become crystal clear right there. They invited Wode Maya not to show the world their utopia of unity and peaceful cultural preservation, but rather to gain global recognition. It wasn't about exposing them. It was about amplifying their visibility and promoting their agenda. And let's be honest, they know exactly what Wode Maya was going to ask, and they rehearsed their talking points and even prepared their deflections. So when they started talking about the Zulu king, I honestly just rolled my eyes because comparing Shaka Zulu, a defender of his people against the British invaders, to colonizing settlers is absolutely shameless. It's a twisted attempt to deflect from their own history of occupation and violence, because how do you even compare the defender of black land with those who took it? I mean, how do you use that as a justification for your right to occupy a stolen land? Because it's honestly laughable. Because a people who resisted colonial invaders are now being used as a shield to justify settler occupation. That's a level of manipulation I can't even begin to understand. Because when did defending your land against invaders become equivalent to being an invader yourself? That kind of historical revisionism is so dangerous, almost as if they're trying to rewrite the narrative of oppression to fit their agenda. And Wode Maya, in his wisdom, right, also made a very important point that no one seems to be able to explain, which is, why is it okay for Orania to exist with no black people, but no African country is allowed to create such an exclusive space for black people in Europe without facing international backlash? I mean, where's the logic in that? If Orania's model is cultural preservation, then why is it that when black people do the same thing in Europe or any other place, it is labeled as racist, divisive, and backward? Let's watch.
With all the monument that I see in here, would you agree with me if I say that this man performed a lot of atrocities in the past?
Well, I think obviously these are controversial figures, and I think the fact that we put them here in Orania with our own funding, some people are uncomfortable in the rest of South Africa to care for them, to see them in public, because this is on private land, private funds, and it's our history.
But I know it's your history, but at the end of the day, a lot of people were harmed in the process. You don't think if you are embracing this, you're definitely embracing apartheid?
Is it okay to celebrate Shaka Zulu, Zulu leader? You know who that is?
I know who Shaka Zulu is.
He killed a lot of people. Is it fine to celebrate him?
That's a question for South Africans.
That is a question. This is a question for Oranians.
He was more like the architect for apartheid. Do you agree with that?
I agree with the fact that he implemented a lot of policies in the apartheid era.
You don't think it's because of this that's why people have problems with Orania? It's because so many South Africans are not happy with this history, even though it's part of them. But I believe, like you just said, let the past be past. I mean, we can never forget our history. But I mean, I feel like this being here, it's more like a, what do you call it? Like a sword in the eyes of the people of South Africa.
I don't think so.
Do you believe that whatever you guys are practicing here is racism?
I do not believe that we are practicing racism.
And let's not even get started on the idolization of apartheid era figures, because Joost Strydom couldn't even explain why Orania, which proudly displays statues of apartheid champions, isn't racist. It's literally built on racism, but they still act as if they are victims of racial discrimination. Unity in diversity? That's the claim, right? But how can you preach unity when you're actively keeping out a whole race of people from living within your community? And how can you justify your existence on this land when it's fundamentally founded on exclusion? And the point he said, there's racism everywhere, was telling, because that's a classic attempt to normalize and justify racism as if the existence of racism elsewhere means that we should just accept it here. And no, that's not how we fix things. That's how we keep perpetuating the harm. Because the reality is that Orania is an inherently racist community, no matter how they try to package it as cultural preservation. As a Black South African, I can't just sit back and let this go. I know the pain, the history, and the generations of trauma that these kinds of mindsets have caused. The fact that Orania still exists and that it's being defended under the gaze of preservation is deeply upsetting. I understand the cultural significance of holding on to one's heritage, but that can never be done at the expense of others' rights to live freely and equally on their very land. And to Wode, I say this, right? I appreciate your effort to bring this issue to the world's attention, my brother. But to be honest, this isn't just about exposing Orania. It's about understanding how deep this rot actually goes. And Orania is not some little town preserving culture. It is a symptom of deeper issue of land theft and racial superiority that continues to haunt South Africa. And frankly, The fact that people can so openly defend it and still claim they're not being racist is quite baffling. What are your thoughts on this? Please, let's continue the conversation in the comment section. I really want to hear your views on this. And while you're at it, don't forget to give this video